Hi, welcome back. Corruption, yes, the other element of occupational fraud. And again, as I said at the outset of this learning module, corruption outside of financial statement fraud makes up a large share of losses incurred by organizations, much larger than simple asset misappropriation frauds. Okay, and as you can see, the corruption incidence or the frequency, it's much less than asset misappropriation, but the losses are much larger. One more thing on corruption, nearly half of the occupational fraud cases involve corruption. And as you can see here, the corruption was associated with asset misappropriation. It was associated with corruption and financial statement fraud. And it was also associated with just financial statement fraud only. And if you add those percentages up, it adds up to 48%, nearly half of total frauds, corruption. What do we mean by corruption? We mean bribery scheme, conflict of interest schemes, economic extortion schemes, and illegal gratuity schemes. Wow. Okay. So what do we mean by these schemes in more detail? Conflict of interest is any scheme in which an employee, a manager, or executive has an undisclosed economic or personal interest in a transaction that adversely affects the organization. Now, adversely affects could be they take your thinking time away. They make you to have bias in the decisions that you need to make for your main employer. All right. So these things can be very intangible in terms of affecting your knowledge work that you are employed to do. Bribery, much more salient. It's a scheme in which a person offers, gives, receives, or solicits something of value for the purpose of influencing an official or a business decision without knowledge or consent of the principal. Now, I want you to click over to the bottom row, and that is extortion, and that is the opposite of bribery. Bribery is something you do to reward the act of someone else. Extortion is something you do to force someone else to act. And so that may be through violence. It may be through threatened force, fear, or economic duress. So economic extortion is basically the flip side of bribery. Finally, illegal gratuities. Any scheme in which a person offers, gives, receives, or solicits something of value, or because of an official act or business decision, without the knowledge or consent of the principal being your employer. So if you do something for someone, you give a supplier business and they actually take you out for dinner, they give you tickets to go to the ball game, that can be considered an illegal gratuity because it might force you to have bias in the next time you do the purchase order. All right. So keep these things in mind. Conflict of interest, bribery, the opposite, economic extortion or extortion. Finally, illegal gratuities, corruption. Yes, there you have it. And we're nearly to the end. And here you have a little bit more detail and explanation of what economic extortion is. But note this, economic extortion is about forcing someone to do something, whereas bribery is all about rewarding someone's act after they have done something for you. One is before, one is after. The other difference is bribery is not directly a criminal offense, whereas extortion is a criminal offense. Rounding these parts up for Learning Module 14, after studying this chapter, I hope that you have a better understanding of the extent to which employers and others commit occupational fraud. Yes, in terms of the count by numbers, occupational fraud overpowers and smothers the instances of corruption and the instances of financial statement fraud. However, the latter two make up a much larger portion of fraud losses to companies around the world. You are to describe the nature and various types of asset misappropriations. And the best way is to think in terms of the incoming funds, that is skimming, the larceny of assets and cash that is already inside the organisation, and then the outgoing funds of the organisation, fraudulent disbursements. So keep that in mind. Incoming, money inside, and money going out. They're the three big categories of occupational fraud under asset misappropriation. Finally, I ask you to discuss the nature and various types of corruption. And as you can see, bribery and economic extortion are opposites. And then you've got conflicts of interest, and then you've got illegal gratuities. This is O'Connor. See you in the class, and stay tuned for Learning Module 15. Bye for now.